Okay, so It Chapter 2 has arrived, and I have to say I wasn't disappointed. Now, for context, this isn't a film franchise that I was in any way wanting to see. I was a massive fan, always have been a massive fan of the original 1990 TV version. To me, that is the standard and it remains the same. So over the years I'd heard about they were doing an It movie. It was going to be a big theatrical release unlike the original version, not that that was essential, but it was a film that I don't think I was asking for particularly. I wasn't really anticipating anything good, but I think that first film 2 years ago really acquitted itself. So obviously the follow-up to that had to at least match that standard now. I feel that this film did do that. I wasn't let down in any way, but I didn't find it to be much better than Chapter 1 basically. But that's not a bad thing because I did like Chapter 1 for context. I know a friend of mine, John Bailey, who has sometimes appeared on this channel, quite interestingly made a point that he felt that although It Chapter 1 isn't as good as the first half of the original 1990 version, It Chapter 2 would be better than the second half of the 1990 version, because the second half of that original 1990 version does tend to get a bit of criticism, just the kind of way it fizzles out a little bit. I didn't really feel that way, but I can see the point. So that was really my question going into this: is Chapter 2 going to be better than the second half of that original one? I don't know about that. In some ways it does things a lot better. Obviously having a big budget and having more time to kind of tell the story and go through it all is definitely plays to this film's advantage. I mean, one thing I will say about Chapter 2, it's a very long film. It's 2 hours 45. I feel it didn't need to be that long, to be honest. There was a lot of filler in this. But again, it was a good film, so I don't begrudge it. I just don't feel it was necessary, and I think possibly could harm some of the feedback that it gets, because it does feel like a long film. Luckily I saw this in IMAX and I paid a bit extra to get a recliner seat, but I'm really glad I did, because it would have been uncomfortable to have been sat there for such a long time. Now, like I say, how this compares to the second half of that original film, specifically, I guess I'll get into some spoilers now, so I kind of spoke broadly, I guess. So to get into specifically how I feel it did things better, a few examples. Obviously in the original one the deadlights were mentioned, and that was kind of shown a little bit in Chapter 1, but in Chapter 2 here we specifically get to see what the deadlights are. They are effectively its essence. That is what it is. Everything else you see is pretty much for show. So the clown, every other monster that this thing appears as is an illusion. The deadlights are what the thing is, and it's something that came down to Earth millions of years ago, basically in an asteroid of some kind, and landed, and the remains of the crater are underneath Derry. So it physically explains why it's underground, what the deadlights are, why it shape shifts, why it does what it does effectively. There's all sorts of other storylines kind of woven around that, and I won't get into this here. I'm just kind of speaking about the film, how I felt about it. If you want to know more, I would just say go watch the film. But obviously there's a lot of stuff from the book that wasn't in the original film that they do kind of get into here. So if you're a fan of the book, as well as being a fan of the original film, hopefully there will be something for you in this. Now, obviously the characters in this are a big part of whether or not the film is good or not. The original film with the 7 children, a lot of the success of that film, that was a coming of age story, but obviously with the performance of those kids, I thought they were really good. That could have been something that could have backfired in Chapter 1 dramatically, but it didn't, because they got it right. The casting was very good. But obviously the question was going to be, are the adult portrayals, are they going to be good as well? I feel they were. I think some of the casting choices in this were absolutely spot on. There's a couple of questionable ones in terms of like, physically does this person look like that person? Some of them are spot on, some of them maybe not so, but I think that the performances were good enough that you can kind of justify connecting the dots. So that kid there is this adult here. They might not come across that way because they look nothing like them, but it doesn't really matter because the portrayal is very good, and the way that the character acts and has a journey from A to B, that worked. So again, I wasn't too bothered about whether or not they looked like the child or the adult equivalent. Obviously, there were some expectations going into this based on the original Tim Curry 1990 version, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in that you kind of wanted to see in this. So there were quite a few nods here and there. There's an interesting cameo. The guy that played Ben Hanscom, the fat kid in the original version from 1990, has a cameo in this. When you get to meet adult Ben Hanscom, the first scene where you meet him, like I said, a kid that played him in the original version, obviously grown up now, has a cameo. He's kind of in the background, so that was pretty cool. There was a really good reference to The Thing as well, which is kind of weird explaining this, but if you've seen The Thing, obviously, there's a bit where a head kind of gets cut off of the Thing, and it grows legs like spider legs and crawls out. And somebody famously in that film says, "You gotta be fucking kidding me." In this, there's a bit where Stan, who is the one who kills himself, an apparition of him appears, similar to in the first one where his head is in a fridge. If you've seen the original version, it's adult Stan, his head is in the fridge. In this one, it's the child Stan appears and he comes out of the fridge, obviously a reference to the original one, and his head kind of drops off and then grows spider legs and starts crawling around, and somebody says, "You gotta be fucking kidding me," which is really cool because that's a really clear reference to the 1982 John Carpenter The Thing. Also kind of weird connectivity there. The guy that played Stan in the original version in 1990 was in The Thing. He played Clark in that film in the 82 version of The Thing. So some kind of like weird like full circle thing going on there between the two franchises. What else can I really say about this? Bill Skarsgård, excellent as Pennywise, really was great in this. He brought something new to the role that Tim Curry didn't do. It could have just been a Tim Curry rip-off, but evidently that wasn't the case. If you liked him in the original, you'll like him in this. Obviously, in the original one, I think it got a bit of criticism for this spider thing that appears. In the original one, it ceases to be Tim Curry's Pennywise, which kind of shit, really, to be honest. But in this one, it stays as Pennywise kind of from the torso up whilst having a spider body, so you kind of get best of both worlds there. Anyway, I do recommend this film. I'm going to try and wrap this up because I could talk about this for a long time, but I want to keep this fairly short. So, have you seen the original 1990 version? Have you seen this? How do you compare the two? What do you think about it? Have you not seen it yet? What do you anticipate? What do you expect? Let us know in the comments. Now, there will be a Halloween special coming up on Brand X Reviews this Halloween, obviously, like we do every year. So we're just working on that at the moment with the core. So we'll see how that goes. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, obviously. But for now, I'll just leave it there and say thank you very much for watching.